Quran, which is our scripture, our holy scripture, and the example of the founder of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him. And just before I go into this, there's a term, this is like a pet peeve of mine. I'm a journalist, as I've been introduced on. But as a journalist, I've always campaigned against the use of the term Islamist terrorist. Because Islamist terrorist infers that there is a link to the religion of Islam with terrorism. Adding a different letter on at the end, and this is to no one, not to anyone personally here, this has been done by many media outlets, and I've been campaigning against it. Adding a couple of letters onto the end of a word doesn't mean that you don't recognize the first word. It's very obvious. They have nothing to do with Islam. Islam itself is the Arabic word for peace. Muslim, by literal definition, is someone who spreads peace. A Muslim terrorist is an oxymoron. You can't have a peaceful terrorist. They don't work. My pet peeve over and done with, off the chest. Jihad as well. Jihad is a very interesting concept because it's often misused and misinterpreted. Jihad has been openly talked about to be war. It does not translate to be war at all. Jihad, as was also mentioned in the recitation of the Quran in the beginning, has been given to those people the ability to struggle, given to those people who are persecuted against. And there are many different types of struggle. The first and foremost type of struggle, which the founder of Islam told us, called Jihad-e-Akbar, which means the biggest jihad. That is the struggle of the self, to make oneself a better person, a pragmatic person contributing to a better society. And the Jihad-e-Asghar, which means the smallest jihad, is the jihad to look after the freedoms of other people. And in the verse that was mentioned, just after that, it talks about, in fact in the verse I believe it says as well, that if this was not allowed, then cloisters and synagogues and temples and mosques would have been pulled down. Showing us that the only case in which warfare or military intervention is allowed is to uphold the fundamental human rights of others, as I think has been already explained very eloquently by the speakers before me. It's an interesting point there. Muslims believe in two fundamental columns. Islam as a building rests on two fundamental columns. And they're things called huquqain, which means the two huquq, which means the two rights. You have huququllah and huququl-ibad. Huququllah is the rights of God, the creator. And huququl-ibad are the rights of the creation. Without any one of these columns, the building of Islam totters and it fails. Our religion is based upon the helping of other people, looking after their rights and looking after our relationship with God. This is fundamental to us. Anyone who does not look after either of these rights, and often we see in the case today, many people around the world, they may have a very strong relationship or seemingly strong relationship with God, but when you look at their track record with their human rights or their love with their neighbours or their love with their parents or their children or the people around them, it's abysmal. Islam represents both of these. It's imperative that we understand that. But having said that, we must understand that doing good in itself is a good act. It should not be that we do good to be seen by other people, or we do good because we want to hide away from a wrath of God, or whatever we want to call it. In fact, there's an interesting story. It's a narration of a famous Sufi Coptic, and her name was Rabia Basri. And one time she was known for almost like, I can say quirky without getting any sort of backlash, but like quirky ways of showing things, right? And one time she was running down the street, and in one hand she had a pot of fire, and the other she had a pot of water. And the people were like, well, what are you doing? You're running around with a pot of fire and a pot of water, I'd ask her. And she turned around and said, I'm going to extinguish the fire of hell and burn down heaven. Because people do good for the want of a reward by God. And they only abstain from evil because of the fear of a wrath of God, or the wrath of a punishment. To take that away, we should only be doing good for the sake of doing good, for the sake that it spreads peace and love and harmony in the people around us. And if we get a reward from God, as Muslims we believe that we will, then brilliant. But that shouldn't be our pushing factor. The push should be, I should be good to you and to you and to you because I want to be a good person, because I want to make you happy. We've talked a lot about different examples from different religious individuals, and of course, as Muslims, we believe in all of the prophets of God. Jesus, Abraham, Moses, Krishna, we believe in them all. It's a fundamental pillar of our belief. But I want to give you a couple of examples from the founder of Islam, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, which exemplify and talk to us and tell us about how he, not only through his words, but through his example, instructed Muslims to be tolerant and to be loving towards people of all faiths and all backgrounds, faith or indeed no faith. On one occasion, I want you to imagine it. So the Prophet of Islam was sitting down and his companions were around him. And a procession came past. It was a funeral procession. And it was the procession of an elder of the Jewish community had just passed away. He was a Jewish rabbi. And of course, around that time, there was a lot of conflict between the Jews and the Muslims. And at that time, the Prophet stood up in respect for the funeral procession. And it was a large group of Muslims that were sitting down. The companions turned around to him and they asked, why are you standing up in respect for a Jewish procession? He's not Muslim. And the Prophet turned around to him and said, was he not human? And that very much just emphasizes the fact that often we get tied up in differences of politics, differences of religion, what clothes we wear, what our accent is, if I'm from Birmingham or London. And in reality, we forget the biggest commonality that we all have, that we're human. We're created equal in the eyes of God. And that is something we often forget. Another famous example is that of, there was a group of Christians who came from an area called Najran. And they came to talk to the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings of God be upon him. And they were Trinitarian Christians. They came to discuss a Trinitarian version of God. They came to discuss the concept of is God one or is God three, and the matters of that as well. After the discussion had finished, it became time for the Christians to pray. So the Holy Prophet at that time turned around and opened up the mosque's doors and said, by all means pray in our mosque. And the point that he made then, he explained it further. He said that this is a house of worship, not of me or of a religion. This is a house of worship of God. And who is worse than that person who stops someone from worshipping God in whatever way they feel fit? God isn't a physical thing in front of us that we all know. If I wanted to pick this water bottle up, I'd pick it up with my hand. I could do it with my feet, but I'm not that flexible. But God isn't a physical thing. You interact with that. You interact with him in different ways. And this is the diversity that we celebrate. That different religions are different paths leading towards God. Something that we have to understand and have to appreciate. Indeed, in a diverse society such as Britain, something which we champion, indeed do continue to champion. Lastly, the Constitution of Medina. This is one of my favourite ones. At the time when Islam had become the ruling sort of religion or the ruling political party as well, because the Prophet at that time was not only a religious ruler, but because of the fact that he was in charge of the army and in charge of the political area, he was also the political ruler at the same time. By the way, we believe in a complete division of state and religion. So in the modern day, we have no political aspirations. Probably throw that in there anyway. But at that time, when he was in charge of the area and also in charge of the religious and the moral upbringing kind of thing, he signed a treaty.